Okay, good afternoon and welcome everybody to AI Colorado's Virtual Connect, our Wednesday weekly series where we have community conversations for the architecture profession and others in the design and construction industry as we navigate this new environment post-COVID world. We've got a great lineup for you today. We wanted to hear especially about how this situation is impacting our partners in local government. Obviously, they are play a very important role in everything that we do to deliver projects. And without them, that just all comes to a halt, and we need them to be effective and supported while we go through this process. So we've assembled an all-star cast of characters today to help us understand what's going on there. Attendees today will earn 1 learning unit for attending this presentation. Please make sure you've RSVP'd by the online calendar event to receive the credit. That link is in the chat function, by the way, so you'll see that there. And then if you have questions, it'll be an interactive conversation. We have some questions ready to go, and I'm sure there'll be others that come out of that conversation as well. But if you have questions, those are also very important. So you can use the Q&A function. We'll be monitoring that as we go along. So just enter that question. That is an option on the bottom of your Zoom panel for you to monitor and check in. Now, without further ado, our panelists today, we've got 3 of the best in the business. We'll start with Greg Wheeler. He's the Chief Building Official for the City of Thornton. Greg's been serving Thornton in that role for the past 26 years and has over 35 years of experience enforcing building codes. Greg is currently serving on the State of Colorado Appeals Board for School Construction and the State of Colorado Appeals Board for Healthcare. He is past president of the Colorado chapter of ICC and is the current president of the International Code Council, a national 64,000 plus membership organization. The ICC is a nonprofit association that provides a wide range of building safety solutions, including product evaluation, accreditation, certification, codification, and training. It develops model codes and standards used worldwide to construct safe, sustainable, affordable, and resilient structures. And we're proud that Greg is one of our own from Colorado who's now on the national stage. So welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Next, we have Andrew Fairbairn. Andrew's educational background includes a bachelor's in urban planning from Hunter College in New York City and a master's degree in global studies from the University of Denver. Working for over 30 years in landscape design in the construction industry and principal and owner of Service First Permits since 2009, he understands the importance of code-compliant construction and development for economic growth. Enforcement of international building code and the municipal regulatory review process is important for public safety, safety of first responders, and the prevention of litigation. Mr. Fairbairn has had the opportunity to represent thousands of private sector companies through the submittal and review of construction project proposals, and is always attempting to improve the dialogue between public and private sector stakeholders. He's someone we became acquainted with through an AGC task force on local government, and we're delighted to have you here as well. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Mike.
And finally, Scott Prisco, AIA Lead AP, is the Engineer, Architect Director, Chief Building Official for the City and County of Denver. Scott's career spanned the public and private sides of development, design, and construction. Scott most recently served as Director of Design and Construction for the Arlington, Virginia Public Schools, heading up the district's ambitious capital improvement program. Prior to that, Scott owned an architecture firm in New Jersey and has designed myriad buildings, including the Microsoft School of the Future in Philadelphia, as well as several projects in the United Kingdom. As Denver's building official, Scott is responsible for applying and enforcing the Denver Building Code to ensure the safety of all buildings in Denver. He oversees plan review, permitting, and inspection services, and will be working to improve customer service across all projects, big and small. And I'd like to also thank Scott for his active involvement in the AIA Government Affairs Committee. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
All right, we'll start it off, and anybody can take this first question. Just give us a lay of the land. What are some common trends that are emerging in new building department policies and procedures during the pandemic?
Well, one of the things I think that many of the people are seeing out there is the fact that for occupied spaces, video inspections using FaceTime, Google Duo, other social formats to do that. And I think that many of the departments that I'm talking to, and I've been talking to anywhere from Thornton all the way up through Longmont, everybody seems to be pretty excited about it, both the departments and the citizens. And so I think that even once the pandemic is done, I don't think you'll see those going away.
Scott or Andrew, what are you guys seeing?
I think we're seeing we were probably trending 65 to 80% of our work being digital or electronic submittals, and this just sort of ramped up to be almost 100% at this point, other than like resubmittals for projects that started with paper, and then you know, we have like intake boxes and outtake boxes, and we let the paper sit for a short period of time, a day or so, before we look at it. But other than that, everything's ramped up electronic. We were able to stand up our walkthrough counter that was usually a 20-minute review. You get your permit. We've turned that into a digital process as well. So now that's you submit online through our Acela Citizen Access portal and log it in. And 2 days later, you have your permit. You never have to come in the building. You can pay for it online. So everything is sort of digital at this point, from the very smallest process that you need to do with us to the big, you know, $100-200 million login project. So we haven't done what Greg has done with the virtual inspections, but in terms of plan review, we are pretty much 100% now at electronic or digital plan review.
And Andrew, you're dealing with multiple jurisdictions, whereas, you know, Scott and Greg are more, you know, one jurisdiction specific. Can you echo what you're hearing from these two and add any others that you're seeing?
Most definitely. We're definitely seeing, of course, video conferencing, which we're experiencing right now. That's common workplace. We're all working remotely. So remote work protocol is almost creating a paradigm shift with the assumption that everyone has to be in the office. So we're looking at that from internally from our company as well too. Are there efficiencies in that as well too, moving into the future? We are seeing electronic submittal being implemented, and I do give Scott and City and County of Denver Development Services a lot of credit for being on the forefront of that locally and even nationally. When the COVID-19 shelter-in-place stay-at-home order was issued, it was a quick pivot for them, and I really give them a lot of credit for being so adaptive and ready and already on the foresight of that. So we are seeing a lot of jurisdictions go to electronic submittal, some very simple with an email and some with a database, and some there's still some glitches to be worked out as well too. It still takes some oversight to make sure that projects are getting processed through some of the jurisdictions that are smaller jurisdictions and are trying to pivot to an electronic submittal quickly. But in comparison to other larger jurisdictions where I work in California, including San Francisco and Oakland, they did not have this capacity in comparison to City and County of Denver. So I really give the City and County of Denver credit for being aware of this and making such a quick change. So.
Andrew, to follow up, you've been involved in these conversations that have been happening weekly with AGC and some other partner groups in the industry. How important is it in the context of this changing dynamic to keep these construction and you know, the reviews, the permits, inspection activities on track?
Well, we've discussed this, that I do feel that we're lucky that the state of Colorado considered construction essential throughout, and that's keeping a lot of people off of the unemployment payrolls. And I do think that this communication between the public and private sector, improving that and keeping that flowing for plans review, permit issuance, and inspections is so critical to keeping local design teams, local contractors, local subcontractors at work and not on the unemployment payrolls. So that communication and negotiation and relationship between public and private sector, still with the importance of code compliant construction, taking the forefront. I think that that's really relevant, really value add. And I do think nationwide that the construction industry is going to be looked at as critical to bring the economy back, from a federal standpoint to statewide to local municipalities as well.
And Scott, you had mentioned before we started broadcasting that this was shaping up to be a really strong year for Denver. Has that changed much, or do you see us still on track?
Yeah, so surprisingly enough, we're 42, 43, depending on the day, percent in terms of valuation of projects in the door higher than we were last year, year over year. I looked at it earlier this week, and the numbers are still high. We're seeing about 13 to 14% more projects in the door year over year. And last year was a stellar year for us. We were at 5.2 billion in valuation. We are down on single family and duplex projects. So you can imagine those numbers then are even bolstered higher from a commercial project perspective. Now, if you look at our permits out the door, those are down. You can imagine homeowners and whatnot. They're not doing roof replacements. They're not doing hot water heater replacement. They don't want folks in their house doing projects for the most part. So those are way down, and our single family and duplex new homes and are down. But our commercial numbers are way up. And part of that was based on, we thought, on possibly trying to come in the door before our effective date, which would have been April 30th. So we're going to monitor closely if that's the case. And the number of permits also going out. We've had our fire team, our plan review team has been understaffed, unfortunately, and they're trying to fix that. And we have a solution in the works. So we think we'll get caught up with that. It'll be interesting to see once we get caught up and they don't have a backlog, if those permits get pulled. Because I know a lot of projects in hospitality and other sectors are going to get put on hold for an indeterminate amount of time. So it will be interesting to see, and we're going to be tracking that data very closely in Denver.
Greg, how you talk to members around the country, really, not just in Colorado. How have they adapted to this new operating environment?
Some have been very good, like the city of Thornton. I like to think that we're leading it. We're doing everything that city and county of Denver's doing. We've had electronic plan review, submittals. Even our adamant do-it-yourselfers love to submit online because they can do everything online. They don't need to take off time from work. They don't waste time at my counter, and they get everything done. Across the country, probably the worst case is the state of Michigan, where construction is still considered non-essential, and the building officials and the inspectors are sitting at home, and of course the builders and subcontractors and everybody else aren't getting anything done because they can't go to work. It's so bad that they're starting to talk about furloughing entire building departments. And I'm sure that on the private side, they're going crazy too, trying to figure out what to do. And then you can swing all the way across to where, like Scott and myself, we're doing everything online that we can. We're doing video virtual inspections for occupied spaces. We actually, with the city of Thornton, we did require the contractor not to be on site the entire day of the inspection. We've even backed off of that now. It's the inspector shows up, empty the site, we get the inspection done, you can go right back to work. So we're working on those. So I think that you've got the complete range. I mean, the state of Washington, the governor just started naming off what was essential construction. So those folks are going back to work. So you've got everything from you're going to sit at home on a furlough to being very busy. We haven't missed a beat as far as city of Thornton. We're on pace to what we did last year. Our inspections we're knocking out. We're not seeing any real decrease in activity. We're still knocking out anywhere from 100 now Monday it was rainy, inspections were down. We only did about 111, but typically we're up around 150 to 170 inspections a day. And so you're seeing the more forward-thinking, cutting-edge people getting that stuff done. And so some of our folks are doing all new construction, all outside stuff, but not doing any interior stuff. So we're not getting any of the tenant improvements done. We're not getting basement finishes done, things like that. So across the country, it's across the gamut from nothing to cutting edge.
Are you seeing any distinctions between a scenario like we have in Colorado, where it's very jurisdiction driven in terms of code adoption and building departments versus other states that may be more of a statewide building code and one, central office?
No, not really. I think that whether you're a state mandated code or you're a home rule state like Colorado, it's just, again, it's everything from, nothing to cutting edge. There's no trend to say, okay, if it's state mandated code, these guys are way ahead of the curve or way behind the curve, or home rule states are ahead or behind the curve. It's just, it's almost goes down to jurisdiction, not on a state level, but more on a county or a jurisdictional local government level, municipalities, trying to get the right word out there. But so, I mean, even here in Colorado, we have some that have no electronic ability. So they're virtually shut down. But that's not the majority of our jurisdictions here in Colorado. I think everybody is getting something done, if not everything done.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned how inspections have changed, how you've adapted to changing how you do inspections. And I know, Andrew, you've looked at all of the different jurisdictions to the extent we can find that information and seen how job site safety rules differ from one place to the next. And there have been some adaptations too, where early on we were hearing people would shut the whole site down for an inspection to take place. And now they're doing things like, well, it's maybe just one floor of a building, or we'll partition a certain side of that. How are you keeping up, Andrew, on monitoring that, and what are some resources that designers or contractors can access to find that information?
Sure. So just to be clear, we're often more upfront on the permitting process. So we do get feedback from general contractors out in the field, and I've been on weekly calls with a lot of our contractors as well too, as to what they're experiencing in the field with the inspections. And we have seen some variability, and it's up to individual inspectors as to what their comfort level is with entering into an occupied floor plate or an occupied building. And I think at the beginning there was much more concern and restraint, and now we're hearing that inspectors are more comfortable with approaching an occupied floor plate if they're witnessing PPE in place, safety protocols, social distancing, and they're much more comfortable in entering into the work environment or for an inspection. And it's always been my contention that a construction site is highly regulated already. So adding virus transmission prevention from to the safety protocols on the job site is something that can be done and highly regulated. I am hearing from contractors that there's some experienced inefficiency, and I've thought about that from my office as well, entering into our office. We'll have to wash our hands more, we'll have to wear gloves. I'm at home, I'm at my home office now, so I don't have a mask on, I don't have gloves, I don't have to worry about washing my hands and viral transmission. So I'm not meeting that inefficiency. So from a contractor standpoint, there's been a variety, but inspectors do seem to be more comfortable now that it's been a month and 3 weeks. And video conferencing or video inspections has been effective as well too. And if inspectors are calling and they're showing up and safety protocols are in place, it does seem that they're getting more comfortable with performing the inspection on site in person.
Mm-hmm. Scott, how's your office adapted? There are folks probably still on site as you are, as we can see, and then folks going out in the field. Have they missed a beat, or it's all systems go?
Yeah, we tried to make it so that we didn't miss a beat right from the beginning. We try to keep it up and running, and we get inspection calls the day before, and we get to all those calls the next day. And what we're seeing is we just mandated that sites had protocols in place for every job site. You had to have those protocols in place. We didn't mandate what the protocols were. We just wanted to make sure that you had protocols that made sense on site. A lot of folks have the hand washing stations and stuff. Our guys might notice if it's not working, they'll say, hey, you got to get your hand washing station working again. Or some folks are monitoring temperatures for everybody going on and off the site. We make sure our team allows them to take their temperature when they enter the site. So there's different protocol. You'll see that there's a lot of different, each contractor is handling it differently. And I think the larger, more sophisticated contractors have much better protocol, have much better items in place that are consistent, and where the smaller, maybe less sophisticated contractors maybe don't follow the protocol as well. And that's where our guys might say, hey, clear the floor or clear the area. You know, obviously we're not gonna clear a building in Denver. I mean, that wouldn't be fair. And so we made sure that wasn't our practice. It happened once on one job, and we said, no, that we can't be doing that. That's just not fair to a contractor. The amount of revenue loss for clearing a building would be crazy. You know, for a single family house or a small project, I could see how that would make sense. We've been making sure that it's up to our inspector to feel comfortable. So if they feel they need the floor cleared or an area cleared, they have that authority to do that. And if they feel it's open enough environment, then they have that authority to go do the inspection that way. So we do leave a lot of the freedoms up to our inspectors and how they feel. And like Andrew said, a lot of it is how the contractor's behaving on the site. If they're all wearing their PPE and they're, you know, they took their temperature on the way on the site, they've got the hand washing station, everything looks great, our guys feel more comfortable out there. And that's the normal. Our biggest concern, I went out there on last Friday. It was a little bit warmer. So I spent 4 hours in our central business district. I wanted to see like the West Lot Rockies project and some of the bigger projects, and the Sheraton project, which is really, you know, all floor plates are getting renovated. So it's a lot of people in condensed areas. They're trying to get it done quickly. I'm concerned that hopefully our contractors are going to be vigilant with having masks on. It's hard for these guys that are doing very intensive work. If the weather's hot, especially, you know, in Colorado, you need to get that air. Sometimes a mask is a struggle, and when it's hot. And so that's probably my biggest concern for all the contractors out there over the summer and our inspectors.
Yeah. Well, I know you've kept a careful eye on how the dollars and cents are working out, and Greg mentioned that there are furloughs happening in some of these building departments. How much financial pressure is there on a building department like yours that relies on fees to a large extent?
So fortunately, with a situation like this, we're not an enterprise agency. We're general funded, okay? But although our general fund is way down because 50% of our revenue is based on sales tax. Our numbers are down a little bit. Again, our permits out the door are down a little bit, but what's coming in is still coming in pretty strong. So I'm optimistic that our department at the end of the year will be, you know, net positive. But there are a lot of cuts that are having to be made across, I think, every jurisdiction across the United States because the sales taxes are down, and revenue from multiple streams, parking, you know, you name it. Every revenue stream that a municipality has is down, and so we're all looking to you know, we were fortunate as an agency that there were about 10% of our employees were like to be hired, that we had vacancies, so that, you know, that like if we just don't fill those positions that were vacant, we might be able to be budget neutral, where, you know, other agencies, if they were completely full, then furloughs are happening. And I'm hearing that across the United States, that people are furloughing, you know, and it's unfortunate, but it's a reality. We've been blessed in Denver. We're really busy. We're an important part of the economy. And our department so far has been kept intact, and knock on wood, we're going to stay that way. As I see the numbers are still coming in the door, and I think the development community needs us now more than ever.
Great. What's the pitch you make to mayors and council members about keeping these staff members that make up your membership across the country on the payroll and active and available to help this development go forward? And what can AIA do to echo that pitch?
Well, I can't speak for the mayor's caucus, but some of the things that we're seeing across the way is, as long as, you know, if the numbers are there, I mean, let's face it, a building department is just like any other business. If you've got somebody that you're paying to sit at home and they can't do anything, you're going to furlough that person. I mean, we do it all the time. Business does it, contractors do it, you know, and so that's how business is done. But fortunately, it appears, unless they're just doing a citywide furlough and saying, okay, we're just going to take a percentage of everybody and move them on, that's one way to do it. Unfortunately, that could end up hurting somebody, because if you're still doing the same number of inspections like we are, then now you're going to put an overload on everybody else if you furlough somebody. So I think that everybody needs to be careful about how they do it. It shouldn't just be a wide cut with a sickle to look at. You really need to look at what you're doing, and only furlough when you need to. Now, one of the things that the city of Thornton is considering is no raises next year, but we're not going to furlough anybody either. So, so you've got that extreme to those that are going to go, well, we've got this deficit, we got to make it up. We're slashing budgets as much as we can. And at some point, you're going to have to cut your biggest budget item, and that's personnel. Personnel and budgets, personnel and benefits make up the bulk of everybody's budget. Their operating budget is small next to what all your personnel, your salaries, your benefits, your retirement, your Social Security, all of those things that are part of your budget probably makes up about 80% of your budget, if not more. And your operating budget is very small. So once you start cutting out the operating budget, at some point you've got to go for the big ticket items, and that's personnel. Now, the nice thing about furloughing versus layoffs is you're still technically employed, because most people that are furloughed, they have a job waiting when it's over. Insurance a lot of times is paid for. And so things like that. And so, you can still go get unemployment if you're furloughed, but still, it's, personnel is quick fixes. And so it's much easier if you have employed, and I'm rambling, but if you have furloughed employees, it's much easier to bring those back because they're already trained and they're ready to step right back into their job and go right to work. Whereas if you lay them off, now you've severed all ties, and now you have to go back through a hiring process and a training process, and very inefficient. So if you have to cut back on staff, furloughs, in my opinion, is the best way to go, because then you can call those people back to work when things start picking up, and it's immediate response, because those people are trained, they know the job, they know the city, county or the state job that they had. They can step right into it, and you save 12 to 18 months of training them. If they're a new employee, and if they're an experienced employee, you're still looking at 8 to 9 months to get them up and running fully efficiently in that job. So,
and if they're not there to be hired back on again, they've moved on to some other career path or a different,
of course,
there's not a ready-made labor force that's there to step in and take on these roles.
No, I think that the best thing is if we can keep business going. Architects are still working on projects, contractors are still bidding them, we're sending permits out the door. That will keep staff on. And so construction is considered essential business. I think that it needs to be essential business for both sides of the table. We need to keep our architects, our engineers, our contractors, subcontractors at work. We need to keep our inspectors at work. So, if you're asking how AIA can help, keep the projects rolling in. I mean, really. So that's how you keep everybody working.
Well, you won't hear a counter argument from us on that one. And your comment about staffing reminds me of that old saying, they ask the guy why he robs banks. That's where the money is. I mean, at the end of the day, for these local governments, their probably biggest single line item is going to be personnel related. And so there's only so much financial pressure that they can take from the economy contracting before it's going to get into that sector of their budgets. Have you guys seen, so this situation's expedited remote work, it's expedited or validated the decisions made in some cases to do electronic submittals and use things like remote inspections. Are you seeing it also expediting or maybe forcing the issue on third party or independent contracting with folks rather than in-house staff?
I'll jump on third party. We use third party. We have 2 third-party plans examining firms on contract. We have one of them we contract with our elevator inspection program, and both of them are contracted to supply me with inspectors if they're available when we need them. We use them primarily so that we don't overload with staff to the point that, you know, when you do have a downturn, even a small one, you're not laying people off. So the city of Thornton a couple of years ago got hit with a windstorm, a hailstorm, and then a windstorm all in 3 weeks. We went from issuing about 800 re-roof permits a year to over 7,500. Well, my staff couldn't handle that. So we turned to our third parties and we picked up 4 roofing inspectors to help get us through the inspection process. Rather than trying to hire somebody, teach them how we want the roofs inspected, and then cutting them loose at the end. Did it cost me a little bit more? Yeah. But were they ready to step up and do the inspection immediately? Yes. So you kind of have to weigh the good with the bad on that. So we do rely on them. We rely on the plan review we have set timelines. We tell a client, we're going to turn your plans in X number of days. And we're going to do it, whether we do it in-house or we bring in a third party. And so that's how we use third party. I think there will always be a need for third party for the smaller jurisdictions. They're a great way to have a staff that you don't have to pay for directly every day.
Yeah, from Denver's perspective, we had a third party firm for about 3.5 or 4 years. They were a huge help in getting us through our really busy we had a huge percentage increase from 14, 15, 16. And I mean, we've been on a steady growth cycle. But with working with our finance department, we realized that it just makes more sense from financially to have it done in-house and hire the right number of people, because we're talking about big dollars annually, and so it made sense financially to make that decision. But also from a customer service perspective, we would definitely see there'd be customer concerns, like whether they were going to the third party or we were doing it. There were sort of different levels or expectations or thoughts from the customer, and we'd prefer to have, if there are issues or concerns, being able to handle them internally better and be able to. I'm very customer service oriented. That's like, it's always about providing the best service we can for the customer, and if it means that we're doing it in-house and could do a better job, a more consistent job, then I'd rather do it that way. That would be our preference, besides saving the money. So that's where we landed. It's not to say that they don't serve a purpose, because they did. They helped us through a really challenging growth cycle in Denver. So I mean, they definitely, like Greg said, I think they're invaluable at times. But if you can do it on your own, I think most building officials would rather be, from again, customer quality and cost.
What's your experience been, Andrew?
So I do see that many jurisdictions have permanent third-party review companies, private sector companies in place as their reviewing staff and as their inspection division as well too. And to what Greg was saying and Scott as well too, it's definitely relevant for smaller jurisdictions. And I agree with what Scott was saying. When there was so much volume, it was helpful to have additional ability to get reviews done. I see validity in that. I've worked with some jurisdictions in California with a lot of success with with a public sector entity, and then you can pay additional fees to get it assigned to a third party. And we would actually physically deliver those to the third party review and get a plans review in a couple of weeks, as opposed to 2 months in an overworked and understaffed jurisdiction. And we've had other experiences where it feels that maybe third party is getting paid by the hour. So they issue quite a few comments, and it takes a lot longer. So we've had mixed experiences, and there is the ability to pay in some jurisdictions as well for overtime, which is less common here in Colorado as well too. To get the third party review, you pay a surcharge, and then there's an efficiency in that for a smaller jurisdiction. So I think that I don't know if this COVID-19 is going to drive any major changes with the third party. I think that the smaller jurisdictions that are utilizing them may just continue and retain them, because it's on demand services for them as their volume goes up, and they can contract and expand more flexible and be more flexible with that. So one thing I wanted to say, Mike, we were talking about the furloughs. I know we've been tracking the furloughing through multiple jurisdictions, and a lot of the furloughing has been considered seasonal employees. So you see some pretty significant numbers from some jurisdictions as to the furloughing, but I think that there's nuance in which staff they're furloughing as well too. And of course, from the private sector development, construction standpoint, we would prefer they not be plans reviewers and inspectors. But there's been some variability. We have seen a lot of park workers furloughed from jurisdictions as well. And I do have Mike, would it be appropriate for me to share the URL link to the AGC website with that information? Would that not be appropriate?
Yeah, that would be a resource to share, and you can, if you want to post that in the chat for folks.
Okay. I'll post that, because that does have, we're daily looking at all of the jurisdictions, the information they're posting, and if they're furloughing, any new information that they're providing to the public. So I'll post that for the public to see as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, to look beyond the headline. It's not just about, Boulder lays off 200, municipal employees, or city of fill in the blank, furloughs 25% of their workforce. Who is it, not just the number, and what kind of work do they do? So Scott and Greg, you've made some changes in your submittal and review processes, or are going to be doing that once you open back up, have a physical office to open back up again. What can designers expect when they come to you in the future?
I think that what they can be expecting is pretty much what we're doing right now. I think that a lot of jurisdictions have come to realize, a lot of them resisted having people work from home. But with this event has taught us how efficient we can be working from home. And so I know that even at the city of Thornton, we probably won't fully staff our office ever again. We'll probably have some of them we'll probably rotate them in, but we'll have them working from home also, because, as especially a lot of folks know, that if your phone is on from 8 to 5, you can get more work done from 7 to 8 than you can between 8 and 5. I mean, really, the phone's always calling, somebody's at the counter or something like that. And we're finding that our efficiencies are so much better that we could probably leave 2 of our permit techs at home doing all the computer work and that type of thing, while the others are answering the phone and working with customers at the counter. I think that you'll see more appointment type stuff as people transition more. I mean, we've been doing this for quite some time with our electronic plan review, portal submittal, payment online, and things like that. And you'll see a lot of more jurisdictions start investing in that so that they're better prepared the next time we have some type of event. Doesn't matter whether it's a pandemic, epidemic, tornado, whatever the event is. They'll be able to work, and people will be able to work from home. And so I think you'll have a little better employee morale. At least I think we will. If they've got, you got an impending snowstorm coming in and it looks like we may have a snow day, you can work from home rather than burn a vacation day or you know, something like that. So I think a lot of things. I think you'll probably still see more meetings virtual for, you know, getting the architects and the engineers together and the planners and the plan reviewers together, because then you're not flying in from somewhere. Andrew's not flying out to California to have a meeting. You know, so I think you'll see a lot of virtual stuff be expanded, better platforms coming out. I saw an ad yesterday on TV for, what was it, Google Team meetings. So I'm sure that that's probably in response to the Microsoft Team meetings. You know, I think you're going to see more and more of that come in, to where, you know, conference rooms are going to have the, you know, the ability to do a big Zoom meeting. You know, you're sitting there, you'll have your team, I'll have my team, you know, we can sit there and do that. So I think that this has taught us we can do this, we can be efficient at it, and I think that you can have better employee satisfaction with it, to be real honest with you.
Scott, any changes on the design side interfacing with your department on the front end of these projects?
We're gonna keep pushing our electronic process. That's our best process. The one thing that we're gonna see a little different, because we've stood up our walkthrough, like over-the-counter process digitally. We want to keep that happening. We want to be sensitive to the small minority folks that it might be easier for them to do paper, but I think we're going to maintain the pickup and drop off, and we've turned this into a 2-day process. That'll also be a 2-day. We certainly don't want to incentivize bringing in paper by doing it over the counter in 20 minutes, whereas if you do it digitally, it's 2 days. So we're trying to keep parity among our processes, but we want to be sensitive to folks that might not have access to you know, some of the technologies. So that's something that we're working on. And then what will happen at the counter, especially like residentially, single family duplex, service that I think will really help the customers, especially first time users, will be that over the counter time then could be pre-submittal meetings. And that could be a little bit longer meeting, maybe 30 minutes instead of 20 minutes. And then if you've got a project, maybe it's complex in terms of zoning, or building issues, you can work them all out before you submit them, and then submit digitally once you're ready. So that's a service that we're going to provide both commercially and residentially on our counter as we start to open up our counter. We're not anticipating opening up for a little while. We're in the process of putting up, you've seen them all over the place, and you know, the shields, the protective glass and acrylic shield. So we're also getting our counters ready for that, so that when we do open them up, they'll be a lot safer for folks. Besides just having PPE, there'll be a little bit of additional protection for folks. So in terms of working from home, there are challenges for us. It was a little bit clunky for us, even though, and I appreciate the compliments, Andrew, it was a little clunky the first week. We were picking up desktops. I mean, I'm fortunate I have a laptop, but you know, 90% of our team have desktops, and they were picking up, and we have the big screens for the plan review. So people they lugged their desktops and their big screens home and got their station set up. It took about a week till we got things rolling in a good way. And then once it took. So I don't know, as much as we feel it's appropriate that you can be working at home successfully, because our team has been phenomenal. They've been meeting their numbers. They're doing great. And kudos to everyone doing the work that they're doing, both inspectors and plan reviewers, doing great work. But we don't have laptops for all of our teams. And moving forward, obviously, all of our purchases are probably going to be laptops for all teams moving forward, with, you know, docking stations or however we do it. But so we're probably going to have, once we come back, it'll be a slow coming back. But when we do, it'll be more and not as much going back and forth at the beginning, until we can get more newer equipment that'll work easier.
I heard a funny story from a firm principal who hadn't been in the office for a while, and he went back in and thought, oh my gosh, we've been broken into. And then after a second, you realize, oh no, everybody took their computers. Andrew, you're in that niche between the public and private sector, and I don't know. I'll leave it to you to say whether that's the sweet spot or between a rock and a hard place. But as somebody that bridges that gap, what are some ways or some advice you can give to the design community about how to make the process go smoother?
Well, I could give a shameless plug here if I wanted to, but I do think that we always look at format and content and code and policy. I do think it's just important to have a comprehensive submittal package going in with a strategy, and that's where we become involved as well too. Strategy based on policy. As far as moving forward into the future, we're restructuring our office environment as well too, with a reconsideration for efficiency's sake. It's really nice not having to fight traffic every morning. This premise that you have to be in at 8 in the morning in rush hour traffic, that's just lost efficiency. And our business is small enough, and you know, we're somewhat of a family-oriented business to where I've always let my staff make the determination as to what are their optimal work hours. I've got some early risers who are there at 6 a.m., which is before I get there, and then they can leave a little bit early if they get all of their work done. But there's efficiency in that they're not sitting in traffic on what could be a 20-minute drive that's just spiraled into an hour or an hour and a half. So we're looking at that as well too, moving forward, to be creative. And yeah, we're pushing forward with ourselves in a shameless plug. We are moving forward with a national rollout as well too. So we're permitting nationally now too, utilizing electronic because we have the infrastructure in place with our business to facilitate electronic submittals. So we've been looking at this for some time as well too, and waiting for the right opportunity because we've been so busy, and we just took this as a sign that to jump right in. And so we've been targeting this for the last several months, and it just so happened. So we see a lot of the industry changing for the better. We're looking for efficiency across the board, and think it's important to continue the relationship between the public and the private sector. As a whole, as a construction industry, we're not adversarial. We need each other to survive. As Greg was saying, projects that come through, keep them staffed and inspectors going. And Scott understands that as well too. And Scott has always been helpful to the private sector as well too with projects. But we make sure that any asks, which are few and far between for the volume that we're doing, are justified. It's not just a relationship. It has to be based on code compliant construction drawings that have met the criteria for a plans review and code compliant construction.
I know, Scott, you had a specific instance of a code that was in progress for being updated that you changed the timeline on, but so I want to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit, because it's a big change that was in the works that people should know about regardless of when it is fully effective. And then I want to put it to Greg. Do you think that jurisdictions are going to pump the brakes or maybe back burner code updates and adoptions until things settle a little bit more? So we'll start with Scott and then go to Greg.
All right, great. Yeah, I'm so happy. Our council passed a code amendment recently. So we were originally going to have our effective date for the new code, our 2019 Denver Building Code Amendment, which basically pushed forward all of the 2018 codes, plus our energy code was pushing most of the 2021 IECC forward. So it was a pretty big change. Fortunately, the effective date, instead of being April 30th, is now July 31st. And for major projects, we were allowing major projects that were already in the works, so that just because we're doing a code change, we're in a code cycle, that they wouldn't have to change midstream of design. We would let them continue on and go a couple additional months further if they were a larger project. And so what we're doing is we've moved our effective date to July 31st, 2020. And if you're a big project, you can now wait until December 31st of 2020 to submit with approval. If you've already gotten approval to go to July 31st, you're automatically gotten approval to go to December 31st. So there's no extra steps for you. And then one of the biggest benefits I think this change made was, originally it was 180 days, 6 months essentially, to start your project from the effective date. We've turned that into 365. So it's a year now. You have up to a year. So if you pulled a permit, or you're about to pull a permit, or you're going to pull a permit, you don't have to start construction until July 31st, 2021. The thought was there are a lot of projects that are being put on hold, and it's not for anything they're doing wrong. It's this COVID-19 issue. And, hospitality is one of the industries that's hardest hit, and they're very uncertain. They don't know. There are some projects that might be smaller developers and lost their financing from one entity, but maybe they can get financing for another, but it might take 4 months. And why should they have to redesign their project to move forward? So, and have all that additional cost and then carrying cost and time for the architect and a time for our review. So we thought this is really a way that we as a building department could help the development community in this really challenging time. So we hope it helps. We're optimistic that we'll make a positive impact on the community. And we're open to other suggestions, how we can help throughout this duration of, and we don't know how long it's going to last, but throughout it, we are here to, and have, open ears to suggestions.
If designers have already been working their plans toward those 2019 codes, they don't have to revert back to the previous ones, right?
That's correct. So they have, during this whole time now, they have the option of using the old code or the new code. And we would prefer them to use the new code because it's more energy efficient. But we're not opposed to them using the new code. I mean, that would be great. And more of our staff starts to train on the new code as well. So it's a good thing too.
And there are clients that are anxious to capture some of those efficiency improvements too. So
yeah, there are clients and there's architects pushing it. So I mean, there are folks pushing it because it is the right thing to do, to use the more energy efficient designs. So.
Greg, what do you think on this issue of code updates and adoptions? Is this something that might slow down a bit?
We're not anticipating too much. Everybody that was going to adopt the 2018 has already done it. The plumbing and mechanical codes for 2021 are already out for purchase, for adoption. I don't think that people will interrupt their adoption cycle just because those codes are out there. From an ICC standpoint, yeah, buy the codes, adopt them. But from a building official standpoint, I always adopt the year after the codes come out. So I'm on a 3-year cycle, but like for the 2021s, it'll be 2022. Main reason why I do that, I never like the first printing, first edition, too many erratas. So it's always been our policy to adopt the year after it comes out. We will still do that. I don't think that anybody's going to interrupt their 3-year cycle for adoption. We have many jurisdictions across the country that are working on a 6-year cycle. They adopt every other year. So those that are on the 2015 will be adopting the 21. Those that adopt the 18 could possibly wait until 24. But the way that it falls, I mean, if you had to pick the best year, and I say that tongue in cheek, the best year to have a pandemic is 2020. It is not a code development cycle year. It's typically not an adoption year. So therefore, the silver lining in this very dark cloud that hangs over us today is the fact that it is a non-year. There's no code development, there's no code hearings. It's typically not an adoption year. And hopefully we'll get through this thing, we'll get it wrapped up so that, because we are planning as ICC, we are planning on having the code development process moving forward on the cycle that it's supposed to be on.
Well, hats off to ICC's foresight on that one. Just kidding.
We planned this, no. But like I said, if there's a silver lining in the cloud, it's because it's a non-code development year. So that has ICC as a company breathing easier. It's better for our membership, whether you're whether you're an enforcer, a regulator, a producer, or a user in the process, it couldn't have been a better year to have something like this happen, so that it doesn't, so you're not worried about, especially if you're having to furlough people or something like that, you're not worried about a lot of different code changes, a lot of code adoptions coming up that you have to deal with during this time. Hopefully, even with the experts saying that this thing should go through next winter, we should be coming out of it. Code development process gets working. So for everybody, whether it's architects, engineers, code officials, we have our deadlines on the website for your code submittals, for additions, deletions, modifications. Those are all due like January, February, whatever the date is. Don't quote me on that. But it is around the first of the year to get your code submittals in. And so right now, the ICC is working on our cycle, and we don't anticipate having to adjust it at this time. Of course, in 6 months, we'll be seeing where we're at.
I know they had talked in recent years about maybe changing the cycle, and extending it instead of every 3, maybe go to a 4 or even 5 to avoid this on off, every other that a lot of people do. So where you're in effect having 6-year cycles for some jurisdictions. Is that going to be revisited, or is it still committed to the 3-year?
The business model is not set up. I mean, you got to remember codes go back 70, 80 years, back in the 20s were set up, and it was the BOCA, which is the Building Officials and Administrators legacy code. They used to produce their code every 5 years, and then they would do a kind of a mid-year supplement. Well, it got to where the mid-year supplement was as big as the code itself. So then they actually came back to a 3-year cycle. The other 2 legacy organizations have pretty well always been on a 3-year code cycle. The business model has been set up for that, for the legacy codes. It was brought into the current ICC business model. I think what you'll eventually see at some point in time, well, actually what we're doing right now is you got premium access. So you can just pay a monthly fee and you adopt whenever you want to adopt. So it makes it a more fluid adoption process. I can stay on my 3-year cycle. You could be on a 4-year cycle for your jurisdiction. You could be on a 6-year cycle. The cash flow for the company to sustain the membership benefits that we give, the free education days, code books, things like this that we hand out at some of this stuff, all the chapter member benefits, the cash flow would be there to sustain that. And that would kind of take the political arena out of code adoption. And then I think at some point in time, way after I'm long gone, and probably everybody I'm looking at right now is all retired, at some point it's just going to be a fluid thing, and you just say, boom, we're going to adopt at this point in time. And we're going to have this for so many years. And every year it's just a fluid document that just keeps evolving. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, that's where it's going to be at. But I think if you go through premium access right now and you're paying a monthly fee and you have access to all the documents through premium access, is probably the best we're going to get. And it takes the political arena saying it costs too much money to adopt codes, because it's not cheap. Every time the legislature gets together and says, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to give you the code book. Well, the code book itself is a very small cost in the adoption of a code, because you have to advertise in the paper. That's not cheap. You have to go through, like I know that Scott goes through a very rigorous process of going through all the committees he has to adopt a code. Mine's not near as bad, but we still give those people a per diem for showing up. And then you pay the per diem for the city council persons. You got all those soft costs and hard costs rolled into that, to where when I adopt every 3 years, It's somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 by the time I get done. So the only difference between adopting a code and 9 codes is the cost of the code books. Because all the process, all the soft costs, all the reviews by your attorneys, all the reviews by your boards and your commissions is the same, whether they're looking at 1 document or they're looking at 9. The only difference is you're not paying for 8 books.
Yeah.
So I think if you go through premium access, it will soften that blow quite a bit.
All right, well, we'll start doing the wrap-up questions. I got a specific one for Scott from an audience member. And it is, does the 180-day extension to issued permits for a full 360 days include the review period before a permit application or submittal expires?
I'm not following the question. So before or after the 180, so basically you pull your permit, say you've pulled it now, or you pull it in the future, you pull it anytime over the next, that period up until July 31st, 2021, you can start your project up until then. Normally we have a 180-day window for, like if it's in, you haven't done anything, say it's like been inactive because you haven't touched that project, whether you've pulled it or not, right? So if it's sat in our system, you didn't pull the permit, you had all your plan reviews done, all agency says, yep, you're good to go, but you didn't pull it, and it's sat for 180 days, we would cancel that permit, that project. We're turning off of that we're turning that function off now. So if you go through all your plan reviews, you get approval, and then you don't want to pull your permit because you don't want to have those carrying costs because you're not ready to start your project, you can do that now, whereas you couldn't do that before, because we'd have this automated process that would cancel your project.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so one question additionally from the audience was, for jurisdictions that require neighborhood meetings or stakeholder meetings for the planning or zoning process, are changes being made to this, since those probably won't be able to be done in person for quite a while?
Yeah, so we're making it so in Denver, our quasi-judicial processes are happening. So they're, planning boards, you see our council meetings are happening. We're trying to work out all the technologies and make sure that they work and that they are fair, and we're working through all those issues. I know every jurisdiction across the United States is going through the same problem, but we are continuing with ours, our Board of Appeals, our Board of Adjustment, Planning Board, everything is continuing moving forward. I think there are some folks that have to be there, and then there's some folks that can do it, that can, go through the digital presentation process like we're doing now. And we're just trying to figure out the best format for those meetings. But we are trying to be consistent between all of our meetings, that they're going to be we're trying to get consistent with the format, that it works. We had a number of emails that went through yesterday trying to coordinate all of our different groups.
Okay, well, closing thoughts I'd like to have you guys leave us with is, something good that this pandemic brought about that's going to be permanent, and stay with us after this, that is a positive improvement. And while you're thinking of that question, just for housekeeping purposes, if you as an attendee missed anything or want to go back and review some detail from the conversation, you'll be able to do that. We do have the webinar recorded. And please make sure to double up on your assurance of receiving credit, to put your full name in the chat function for attending today. And then next week on Tuesday, we've got a session from Nick Bielitz. He's principal with Morrissey Goodale, and he'll talk about financial analysis and strategic business planning, as we're dealing with a lot of uncertainties economically right now, for managing through this pandemic and planning for the recovery. And then next Wednesday, same time, we have a panel called Emerging from the Storm, and these will feature a panel of architects who have gone through this recession in previous cycles and share some tips and advice for their colleagues. You can find all the events that are coming up on our AIA calendar online. And back to the panel, a permanent takeaway that this has brought about. It's a good thing.
I think for the Thornton, some of the things that will be made permanent will be video inspections. We have been using drones for roofing inspections and multi-story sheathing inspections. We will probably be expanding that. I think that we want to move as many of our customers to the digital world. So even when we reopen our lobby, very limitedly, we're going to have a kiosk set up so that our customers can come in. They can, file online right there. If they've got a small plan, we'll have a scanner there for them to scan in. I think that this will be a permanent fixture for us, even when we start opening up the lobby more. I think we'll probably still try and limit the number of people that come through our lobby. When we do open up, it'll be by appointment only to begin with, and then we'll probably go from there. But we'll have the kiosk for people to use, and hopefully once we've taught them how to use the software, those people will also realize that they can save time and money from doing it from home. So those are some permanent changes you can see at the City of Thornton.
I guess from our perspective, it's more the digital plan review, the front end stuff, that the counter, the walkthrough, that's all gone digital now. And mostly everything is you're able to get everything done without coming to our shop. It's a more sustainable way to do business moving forward. We're not wasting all that gas and energy for, people coming to our office. Hopefully we'll be able to get the right equipment, and some of our folks will be able to work from home as well, knowing now that they are successful at home. So I think there are some positive things that have come out of this horrible crisis. So we're grateful for those things and hopeful that this too will pass soon.
My thoughts are more generally related to society and the environment as a whole. We are seeing environmental improvements with a reduction in traffic, and to Scott's point, maybe society will become more sustainable. He's been talking about the energy efficiency and the code moving forward as well too. So reduction of traffic is great. Environmental improvements, is definitely an upside, and our hope is that we can, as a society, maybe incorporate some of the lessons we've learned. I do believe there are new business models and opportunities that are happening as well too that are innovative, and electronic submittal is an efficient way to do business as well too, and videoing and remote working as well. Hopefully one day I'll be working from a beach again, and we'll all be able to have a video chat remotely and still be effective. So those are the takeaways and the positives in this, even though this is a very challenging environment for us to all be working in right now.
Well, let's put that beach virtual call on the calendar, and we can check in to see how we all made it through this. And we'll do our best to keep the architects busy, and we hope that you guys keep busy too, in a sane level, not more than you can handle. I just want to say thanks so much to Scott, Andrew, and Greg today. Super informative discussion. We hear what you're saying. We hope that we're good partners for you. You've been good partners for us, and we look forward to keeping things rolling. So thank you, gentlemen, and thank you to our attendees for taking